We end today's show in Texas, where a federal jury Friday convicted 8 anti-ICE protesters on terrorism charges in a closely watched trial that's raised fears over the Trump administration's intensifying crackdown on activists and First Amendment rights.
The Department of Justice has secured its first ever terrorism conviction for Antifa-related activity, and this all stems from an incident from July 4th of last year, where Antifa terrorists decided that they were going to draw law enforcement to an ICE facility, only to ambush them by shooting at those officers, wounding an officer in the neck that nearly killed him, and guess what? The federal government under the Trump administration, the second Trump administration, has finally said enough is enough, so they've charged with terrorism-related charges, and they just got those convictions in an absolutely devastating blow to these left-wingers who have been trying to gaslight us for years by saying repeatedly that Antifa, who we've all seen multiple videos of, commit organized acts of violence for political causes, for left-wing causes, doesn't even exist. Well, guess what? Not only do they exist, but they're actually being held accountable, which is finally something that we can be proud of for our federal criminal justice system, because again, this accountability has been sincerely lacking for years. Now, of course, we're going to get into this. We're going to break down not only this, but the reaction. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
So we got some breaking news. We have a verdict in the local trial that's been gaining national attention. An alleged attack on an Alvarado ICE facility.
So one of the things that you'll notice by the news coverage, and by the way, it's not just in the Democracy Now! Video that we're going to go over a little bit, it's also represented right there in the local news coverage, is the fact that the language about this Antifa attack is intentionally vague, despite the fact that we just got convictions for 9 individuals that were involved in it. On top of that, as I told you earlier on in this video, this alleged attack that may or may not have happened actually led to a police officer being shot in the neck while responding to this thing that may or may not have actually occurred, which is ridiculous. It's absurd. But again, this is standard fare because the media has been one of the greatest allies of Antifa over these last couple of years, saying that they don't exist, even though, again, we all can see a coordinated group of individuals that are all dressed the same, believe the same things, and take the same actions as a group that they pre-planned prior to taking those actions. And yet the mainstream media, the local media, and of course the left-wing media are all trying to still convince you that this organization may not actually exist, that Antifa are actually creatures from the earth that just spring up out of nowhere when fascism is afoot, and then they start attacking people at random, but all of that is defensive against the fascism that is definitely out there, and 100% nothing for you to be worried about. But of course, we all know Antifa does exist. We saw them present in the Black Lives Matter riots. We saw the same type of black bloc protesters in Occupy Wall Street doing violence there. This is a common tactic from the left wing, and this pretending away Antifa's existence when it's convenient is absurd and ridiculous, as many attackers have claimed the mantle of Antifa as inspiration for that attack. So shame on the local news for downplaying this when a police officer was in fact shot in the neck. That is 100% true. And again, this was a part of a coordinated ambush that these people participated in.
Ken, the Department of Justice just released a statement, and to give you some context, normally a statement like this celebrating the outcome of a trial would come from the DOJ's local office. In this case, it comes from the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. She wrote, "Today's verdict on terrorism charges will not be the last as the Trump administration systematically dismantles Antifa and finally halts their violence on America's streets." She refers to it as an organization that has been allowed to flourish in what she calls Democrat-led cities.
So notice that this local news presenter is doing this in front of protesters, and she's making commentary on the fact that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, not the local attorney, actually made a statement about this, and she's like, oh, this is very unusual because normally it's the local attorney, but remember, remember, this exists in the context of, for about 6 or 7 years, or actually 10 years, dating back to Trump's campaign, these left-wingers were very publicly denying the existence of Antifa, while we all watch 4K videos of, again, these organized groups of terrorists attack people. The media would actually do segments on them doing Antifa training in order to fight back against the fascists, while simultaneously pretending that they don't actually exist, which is just ridiculous and absurd. Now, of course, we get a collection of the mugshots, the rogues gallery, if you will, of these villains, and as you can see right here, not exactly the best looking bunch of folks. Obviously an unimpressive group, but not surprising if you've seen the Portland mugshots of Antifa members. They look exactly like they're cut from the same cloth, and again, this is a part of a broad group of left-wing antagonists that are absolutely organized, and they commit violence for political purposes, which again are acts of terrorism. And in this particular case, it couldn't be more clear, but again, listen to the ambiguity right here.
This is far worse. The verdicts were far worse than what they were expecting. Their fear, they say, is that anyone who protests the government could now be labeled Antifa and a terrorist. 8 people in all were convicted of this terrorism charge, specifically a charge of providing material support to terrorists. The terrorist in this case being Antifa, which some witnesses described as not being any kind of official organization, but really a blanket term for groups on the left that oppose what they feel is government overreach.
So again, this is absolute nonsense in every possible way. Antifa is in fact Antifa. They are an organization. These people all dress the same. They believe the same things. They fit every single aspect of a political domestic terrorist organization, and pretending that they just come up out of nowhere, again, spring up from the earth in order to fight against fascism is a part of their propaganda. But I will also point out that they're talking about this like, oh, they're just trying to prosecute any kind of protesters. They're just trying to target them. And by the way, it's going to get a little bit more vague later on. But in reality, what happened in this particular instance is you had a bunch of people setting off fireworks outside of an ICE facility, waiting for law enforcement to show up so that a member that was hidden with a firearm could ambush and shoot at those law enforcement officers. And guess what? They hit one of them in the neck, nearly killing him. This is by definition terrorism. And by the way, this is by definition you guys working together as a group, because if you all know each other, you know somebody's armed, they're waiting in the wings in order to kill law enforcement, and you provide a distraction to get them out into the public so that they can be shot. You are a participant in that attempted murder, and if that guy did die, they would all be participants in that murder. This is why they're not only facing the federal charges that they were just convicted of, but all of these individuals are facing state level charges, because everybody should be able to understand, unless they're in the left-wing media, that they were participating and coordinating in this attack. Now, of course, one of these Antifa terrorists ended up having their wife or husband, again, you'll know what I mean in just a little bit, talking about how the feds are now trying to prosecute people for the most benign reason humanly possible.
Song's attorney argued shots were fired by his client to distract officers that were responding. The jury, though, disagreed, finding that it was attempted murder. That jury did acquit 4 others of that attempted murder charge, those who did not pull the trigger.
Federal prosecutors in this case told a panel of Northern District of Texas residents with a straight face that lighting off fireworks on the 4th of July was terrorism, was a riot. I cannot think of anything more un-American than that. And I cannot think of anything more inhumane than the horrors that ICE is inflicting through its state terror on our communities.
So yeah, obviously we're dealing with a transes individual right here, Trantifa, if you will, not surprising in any way, shape, or form, but Lydia is trying to make the case that the real prosecution was related to just shooting off fireworks on the 4th of July. I don't know if you guys know this, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, these folks were just firing off regular-ass fireworks, there was no additional context to that, and that's why they're being charged with terrorism, which is completely un-American, because don't you go to a fireworks show on the 4th of July? July. Again, omitting all of the relevant context in that they were lighting up the fireworks at an ICE facility to lure law enforcement there. When law enforcement showed up to said ICE facility, they fired upon the ICE officers with a gun, wounding him in the neck. You know, those absolutely crucial facts that should have definitely 100% been told to us by the local news media, rather than having this transes lie to us, even though, again, obviously this guy is a part of AntiFa, Trantifa, if you will, the terrorist organization that participated in this attack.
If you can start off by explaining what happened that day and what these charges are that these 8 protesters were convicted of and what they face.
Good morning. Yes, happy to be here and to be able to give more information. I think after the trial that I was able to see in some weeks, I wanted to present what happened based on some of the protesters' perspective. I mean, what happened on July 4th, 2025 was a noise demonstration.
Now, I've been teasing the Democracy Now! Segment again throughout the whole course of this video, which is equally absurd, if not more absurd than what we saw right here, as they bring on one of the lawyers for one of these so-called protesters for their state trial, and he's trying to make the case that all this was just a noise protest. They were just blowing up fireworks at this ICE facility, which, by the way, they vandalized a bunch of cars during the course of this particular action. So they were committing crimes all the way through, make no mistake about it. But the only reason they were using those fireworks, not like the trans is saying, which is because it was the 4th of July and they were just trying to celebrate America, but it was because they were trying to do a noise protest, again, focusing on the fireworks as if they're the primary issue, rather than the ambush that was being set up in part with those fireworks.
Javier, just to be clear, you're talking about a noise protest?
Yes. A noise demonstration. A noise demo is a very common type of protest that happens outside of prisons and jails. And usually they happen in loud days, right? 4th of July, New Year's Eve. And what people do outside is just literally noise.
So I just want you guys to know that I absolutely can't stand this old hag Amy Goodman, who's like, just to be clear, you're talking about a noise demonstration. I thought she was actually going to cut in and, you know, be an actual reporter and say, well, what about the shooting that, again, the noise demonstration was setting up for? But instead, she allows this guy to talk about how, oh, this is typically a thing that people do outside of jails and prisons. It's perfectly normal, perfectly reasonable. Again, clearly and obviously omitting the part where the noise demonstration was being utilized to ambush law enforcement officers. I think that's the key part right there. I think that's the part we should be paying attention to. But again, the way that these people talk is so dishonest, so disingenuous. We're just hearing about the fireworks as if these people were prosecuted for only setting off fireworks absent any other context.
The fireworks did not damage anything. This was very clear on trial. The fireworks did not even hit any fence, any part of the buildings. It was raining that day. But unfortunately, as people were leaving, that was seen on the videos, we heard from the officers, people were leaving as the police was arriving. One of the first arriving officer from Alvarado Police Department got off his car, drew his firearm at some of the protesters, and then shots were fired in his direction. And then the officer shot back.
So I'm trying not to be so angry on this channel. I'm trying not to lose my temper. I know I've sworn in a couple of videos as of late, which, you know, this is a family show. It's meant to be watched with you and all your little children's because it's a family show and definitely not mature topics. But that kind of thing just aggravates me beyond all end, because notice how he describes the cop. The cop gets out of his car. The cop draws his weapon. All of the responsibility for the cop's actions are 100% on the cop. But then shots are fired in his direction. Who fired the shots? Irrelevant. We're not going to talk about that. And the officer ends up firing back. He takes responsibility and fires back against the shots that just came in his direction. Let's be clear about what happened. The officer was shot. he was shot in the neck. They weren't just fired randomly from some kind of other location and happened to travel in his direction. The plot was to ambush this officer and kill him. That's what the left wing wanted to do. The noise was to draw out ICE agents. It ended up being a local police officer that they actually ambushed. And yes, this is 100% an act of terrorism, and no amount of disassociating language is going to change that, despite this absolute weak coward, this absolute scumbag who, by the way, is not being challenged on Democracy Now! By the so-called journalists trying to disassociate the left from their own actions.
So what happened was a noise demonstration that anyone could have gone to, and unfortunately, shots fired back and forth after the officer drew his firearm.
Again, the passive language, shots fired back and forth. No, the Antifa terrorist shot at the officer, and I don't give a damn if he drew his firearm first. He arrives alone at the scene at an anti-ICE riot that is being perpetuated by an Antifa cell. He draws his weapon because there's a potential for an imminent threat, and guess what? He's shot at. And the idea that we're going to say, oh, he drew his weapon, therefore the guy who is hiding is justified in self-defense against him, absurd, asinine. And again, the passive language, unbelievable. Shots fired, exchanged, the shots in his direction. Who knows who did it? Nobody's can be responsible. It was just a thing that happened to happen. But by the way, the officer fired back. The officer took that action. He's an agent. He's not an NPC. He can actually be held responsible for his actions. Again, you're not fooling anyone. We can see the game that you're playing right here.
The charges, unfortunately, were not only material support for terrorism, they were a riot. They were using explosives in the commission of a felony, the fireworks, and then an array of attempted murder charges, which of all those charges, only one person was found guilty, the person alleged to have shot the rifle.
I genuinely hate this guy because he's like, oh, of all the attempted murder charges, only one person was convicted of that. The person who is alleged to have shot the rifle. You mean shot the cop, shot him in the neck, wounded him gravely that he almost died from that.
The person alleged to have shot the rifle.
Also, again, take note of more disassociative language, because alleged is before you're convicted. This person was convicted of shooting the rifle. By the way, it was shooting the cop that was the main issue, not him just randomly shooting the rifle like he was at a shooting range. It was shooting him in the neck. That was kind of the problem right there. That's why he was being charged and has been convicted of attempted murder. So that's the main issue. I don't know if you're aware of that. I don't know if you're on board with that. Your passive language isn't fooling anyone. And again, it's an absolute embarrassment, a massive cope from the left wing, because Antifa has been identified and prosecuted, and guess what? They've been convicted. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you liked the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the left wing defending Antifa terrorists. Till next time.